Welcome, everybody. Apparently, my mic got muted unintentionally. I'm Roy Shamir. I'm a mix engineer, and I've been mixing music, including EDM, since the 80s. I want to thank everybody for watching today, and both live and in the future on demand. The AES New York section has put together a great event for you today. We're going to be talking about modern EDM, modern electronic dance music, and in today's style and in today's market. We have a very special guest host and moderator. That's Adam Reifsteck, and AKA Adam Teknofunk. And Adam is going to pop into our Zoom here, and we're going to get this party started. Adam, please unmute your mic. Okay,
Hello,
welcome.
everybody.
Welcome.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Oh, our pleasure. Thanks for being here. I'm going to be exiting in a moment, but I just want to ask you, Adam, before I go, could you tell us a little bit about the Music Producers Alliance, the organization that you are in charge, that you are the head of, that you run here in, I believe, in New York, or am I wrong?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm actually right at the moment. I'm in North Carolina visiting my family, but I'll
Excellent.
have to be flying back shortly next week, and then go into quarantine, I guess, because North Carolina is still on the
On the
lovely
list.
on the list. So yeah, it's gonna be fun. But anyway, yeah. So I'm a composer, producer, and I started a record label called Teknofonic Recordings in 2015, and have been running that label ever since. And we've been hosting online workshops, music business and then music production workshops. And then earlier this year, I decided, to make it an official platform called the Music Producers Alliance. So it started off as a Facebook group, and it kind of grew into its own platform now. So it's a organization that provides learning resources, networking opportunities for emerging composers and producers. So we host online events as well. And yeah, we have a free community, and you can get feedback on your music, and then also we do continue to do those workshops as well. So I invited some panelists here today, two of which are part of our Music Producer Alliance as mentors. So we have a mentorship program that aspiring producers can get involved with. And then invited a special guest, Dylan, or goes by Il Gates, and he's here as well, and he runs an online online producer community as well, called the Dojo. So yeah, I'll kind of
Excellent. Well, on that
so
note, I will exit. Thank you very much, Adam, for putting this together for us, and
yeah.
thanks to the AES New York Section Committee, all the good work you do. And I'm stepping out, and please welcome your guests, and I'll be seeing you all again sometime soon. Thanks so much.
Cool. Well, thanks, guys, and thanks everybody in the Facebook world for tuning in. Like I said, my name is Adam Reifsteck, and today we're going to be talking a little bit about modern electronic dance music production. So I'm also a member of the Audio Engineers Society, and kind of approached the AES New York chapter, kind of about sort of about what we were doing at the Producers Alliance, and I thought it made sense for us to talk a little bit about the world of EDM production. And as I mentioned, I brought two of my colleagues, Nina Claire Wild, and also Vardy, and like I said, another special guest panelist, Il Gates. Been following Dylan for a while, big fan of his. So just to introduce the panelists a little bit, so we'll start off with Verdi, and he's mixed and mastered and produced for artists all over the globe. He's had extensive career in electronic music toward the Asian market, released music that has landed support by Above and Beyond, Sander Van Doorn, to name a few. And his music has been featured on Billboard, DJ Mag, Mixmag, EDM.com, Dancing Astronauts, to name a few. He's also gotten in the world of sync placement with MTV and Hulu. And then we have from across the pond in the UK, we have Nina Wild. And she kind of started off in bass music, and she's been dubbed, the queen of rough low end. And, she's been featured in major festivals, as well as has her music been played on Radio 1, One Extra, Rinse FM, Kiss FM, and she's, as a DJ, she's performed at Boomtown and Shambhala Festival. And so now she's kind of getting into the world of tech house music, and we'll talk a little bit about that in that transition as well. And then we have Il Gates, and he's had a very lavish, long career in the music business, and he's had big collaborations with artists such as Beats Antique, Mimosa, Opio, and he's had several charting artists with 4 studio albums under his belt, and he's toured the world as a DJ. And he's also an active music educator and runs a online training program called the Producer Jojo. And and he has running his own label as well. So we have a really exciting panelist. So just to kind of kick things up, just want to maybe go down the panel here and kind of share with the viewers a little bit of how you kind of got into electronic dance music, and kind of how long have you guys been producing?
Okay, who wants to take that? I'll do
it. Yeah, I guess, yeah.
We're all nervous, that's why.
Yeah.
Oh God, how long have I been doing it? About 10 years now, I think. You lose track of time, don't you, with things like this? And basically, I got into it because as a DJ, there was only so far you could go, and then everyone's like, "Oh, you DJ, why don't you make some beats and stuff?" So at the time, what was it, Fruity Loops 3.1? Picked up a copy of that. I kind of got on with it, but then I found Logic, and I fell in love with Logic. Got myself an iMac, and I've been on Logic ever since, basically, with little trips to Ableton, just because some of my students like to use Ableton, so I've had to learn it to be able to help them with what they're doing and things like that. But it's basically just been Logic, and the musical progressions being from like house music to electro house and hard house, and then fidget when that was a big thing for like 2 years. Then bass and breaks, and now, as you say, with the tech house thing, just like to mix it up. I start to fall in love with a new genre, and then just like to try my hand at it and see where it goes, basically. So yeah.
Cool. So how about you, Dylan?
I mean, I first got into music when I was a child, like in the 80s. My mom got me a keyboard that had little lights on it that would teach you like jingle bells and stuff. I was not really very interested in learning piano, but I was quite interested in the little 4-pad sampler that it had on it. And when I realized that I could sample my farts and play them back at my friends, that was kind of like really when I got hooked. And then from there, I wasn't really making tracks or anything, but I was just always interested in like any kind of electronic device that would play music, until eventually I got like an MPC in high school and started making these just terrible beats. I remember when I got home, like I was like all excited. I was like, "Oh, you can put any sound in any order. This is incredible." Yeah. So I got a record and I went to go sample it, and it was like 8 seconds later, I was like, out of memory. I was like, "What?" Like, what? It's another $2,000 for the memory? Oh, this is awful. So I was really annoyed, and you can only do so much with 8 seconds of memory, right? Yeah. There wasn't YouTube or anything back then, so it's like really, you couldn't just now you can just watch people kill it on like an MPC 1000, make like incredible music if you know all the tricks and how to economize your memory and blah blah blah. But this was so I got more into DJing, and then very quickly ended up DJing in a breakdance crew, and we would do like graffiti murals and stuff at raves, and So I was always into like Aphex Twin and like Square Pusher and Autechre and all that stuff, but I also listened to Wu-Tang Clan and like Tribe Called Quest and stuff like that. So I was like, surely there's a way to like merge these two influences, and then like our breakdance crew, I'd be like scratching like Merz Bow records instead of scratch tones and stuff, like just like weird experimental noise music. And then so I was always trying to bring that kind of experimental edge to the hip hop world. And then I remember when that Analog Worms Attack came out, that Mr. Oil record, like in the late 90s. And that was just so ahead of its time. Like now music sounds like that now, 20 years later.
Yeah.
I remember that record coming out and just being like, oh my God, this is it. Like, but promoters back then, it was like you either played something with a 4 on the floor kick drum, or you played in the drum and bass room, because this is like Toronto, where like Toronto and Ottawa, where everybody was like drum and bass or 4 on the floor, and that was it. So I kind of like, through the art and graffiti crew and the breakdance crew, kind of like wormed my way onto the lineup by just making myself useful, and then from there I moved to a big city and tried to get on a label, and or tried to get on an agency, because I was like, oh, I paid my dues, I played raves for like 6 years, I'm in there. And then they were like, oh my God, you walked in here with a resume, you idiot. Like, like made fun of me, and they're like, you need to put out records, or we can't sell your tickets, so go make some records. So I started taking it a bit more seriously. I was using like trackers like Impulse Tracker, and then Sony Acid Pro. I had this like combination of Sony Acid Pro FL and Reason that I'm using to kind of make beats. And just made these, they're so bad, but people liked them enough to give me a record deal. So then I had this breakbeat alias, it was like Breaks in House, as the Fat Conductor. And then, over time, I kind of realized that I was letting the A&R department at the label tell me what to do too much. And, I started going to like festivals and like went to Shambhala and like Burning Man and stuff like that. And I was just like, you know what, like, I'm just going to be my weird self, and I'm going to make music that doesn't have a genre. And people, if they're going to buy tickets, they're going to buy it because of me, not because of anything, not because of not because I'm following the fucking rules, And when I just let go and just started just letting it happen and letting it come out, that was when my career really took off. But it was I was just kind of in competition with everyone else going for the same genre for so long, and the competition, it's really fierce when you're all trying to do the same thing. So, when I just let go and just stayed true to like my inner child and just like, went back to that. So that one thing led to another. And then at Burning Man, I was playing this little camp. I mean, they had a Function One and stuff, this little camp full of nerds called False Prophet. And there were some people there from, Microsoft, and they were enjoying my music, and they thought, oh, Ill Gates, wouldn't it be hilarious if we booked them? So they ended up booking me to play at Sundance Film Festival, and which helped me get my work visa and everything, and then come to the US. And after that gig, I got another gig making ringtones for the Windows Phone. And after chopping all my tracks up and making ringtones for the Windows Phone, they were like, hey, can you do comedy ringtones? And I was like, okay, what sounds are funny in 2 seconds or less? And I knew what I had to do, so I got a can of baked beans, and I listened to Eye of the Tiger, and I farted into the most expensive mics I had. And I sold my farts to Microsoft, and that's why you should never give up on your dreams.
Yeah, selling farts to Microsoft. I love that story. That's pretty awesome. Verity, you kind of toured the Asian market. You kind of went the opposite direction, and then now you're doing some licensing as well. So you talk a little bit about your journey in music production.
Well, first off, thanks for having me.
Yeah.
I started off, I guess, on the other side of the spectrum, playing metal when I was a kid. So I was a big metal fan. all types of heavy Norwegian metal, and a lot of that influence has translated down to, dance music. So go figure.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because I started playing the guitar at the age of 14. That's about 20 years ago. So a lot of my approach to music was very much into through the guitar. How do I compose? How do I put a song together? How do I create something, for us to play with a band? So joined a lot of bands, had a lot of issues with different bandmates, bandmates that weren't serious, bandmates that, had issues, etc. And we always kept on breaking up. Throughout this whole, I was a metalhead, but at the same time I used to love trance, which was kind of hard to find, people that kind of like hardcore metalhead, hardcore trance fan. And so that kind of led me to, I said to myself, like, I just can't rely on people in bands. At least my experience was that. So I bought Ableton a while back. This was about like 14 years ago. Well, at first it wasn't bought. I bought it eventually afterwards. And yeah, just started, messing around with some house beats, which I thought was house back then. It was trance, really. Highly melodic, big synth sounds. So one thing led to the other, and I started getting more serious on the electronic side, and started developing that. Got to a point where I was monetizing my art, touring, mixing and mastering for a lot of other artists. So I left my job, was doing it full time. It's been about like 8 years. I'm doing music full time, so it's been kind of great. So yeah, the Asian market was pretty fun. Had a lot of connections there, and it's such a different world, just in general, in terms of, I mean, they're all into like the big room, in your face type of electronic music, right? So we're coming in with a lot of our trance influence back then, and it was kind of interesting. So, so the Asian market was kind of cool. I was part of a duo called Eagle Eye Stallion, which was progressive trance. That's where I got the support from Above and Beyond, a lot of the Anjuna family trance producers. Through time, I got into more calmer music, got into more deep house, melodic deep house mainly. I did a lot of tech house as well on the side. And right now I'm pretty much focusing more on indie dance. I'm working with a vocalist. So it's pretty much like Dylan said, where I tried so hard to kind of fit in the dance scene. And in the dance scene, you're part of this box or you're not. You know what I mean? That was my experience, at least, right? And the worry was always, is the DJ going to play my track? Versus, I don't give a fuck about that. Let me just write what I want, right? So since I started doing that with my indie dance project, where, I mean, some DJs can maybe play it, I've just been the happiest I've ever been. For me, that has translated to what I consider success, through time. And so, yeah, that's what I'm doing right now. And pretty good. I've got the support of One Me Dip, massive publication / management team, which we're kind of, building the project now. It's about a year and a half old. So it's fairly new as well. So overall, it's been great. And aside from the art side, I mix and master a lot for producers. I also have a production mentorship program, where I guide producers, kind of give them insight on production, how the whole production process, sound design, mixing, mastering, they're all tied into a great production down the line, right? So a lot of my effort is that mentorship angle as well, which has kept me quite busy these days. So I'm kind of excited.
Yeah. So to that end, all three of you have DJ'd, and performed live. Would you say that kind of experience has sort of informed you as your work as a producer, in terms of what you're creating right now in your workflow process? Do you have that in mind, or thoughts on that?
Definitely, if I may.
Yeah.
Definitely, it's played a big role in terms of how to visualize, in terms of me, for dance music, right? So we wanted DJs to play our tracks, and it was very much based into a specific formula, right? For lack of better, comparison. But at the same time, there's a lot of great dance music out there, especially from the scene I come, which is the melodic deep house world, and just having to mix tracks from other people live and having to mix your track afterwards, you kind of get to see how at a certain point there's a big difference in terms of is the quality of production through time. So it has played a big role in terms of how I approach dance music for a while. Now things have changed with the indie dance stuff, but definitely playing live plays a big role. With my current indie dance project, it's way more, it's all electronic, but I don't have decks, right? So I'm running a redundant system at two Abletons, bunch of gear, guitar, vocals. So it's much more, I would say, intense in terms of an experience of performing. And when I wrote my first album and then I translated that into a live set, now I'm writing the second album, kind of seeing that process backwards now, kind of playing a big role in terms of what type of tracks do I want to have on this album to be able to perform and bring a different energy live, right? So definitely plays a big role.
Yeah.
When I was just DJing, I wasn't really thinking about how tracks went together and stuff like that. And then as soon as you start producing, your brain's like, how's this fit together? Is this going to fit in with everything else? Will the drops work in the right place? You know, is there too much going on at the start? Because a lot of the time when you first start to produce, you put in far too much. And you don't realise that, of course, if you put in far too much and then you give it to a DJ and there's a full-blown vocal or bass line right at the start, they can't mix it. Whether they want to or not, they can't mix it because it's going to clash with the vocal or the bass line of the other tune. And then, as he was saying, like, when you start putting your own next to other people's, and you've already been playing these people's tunes for ages and they're up there and you want to be up there, you get kind of nervous because you're thinking, is my track going to stand up? Is it going to sound the same? But then at the same time, I'm often thinking, well, I don't really want it to sound the same. Yes, it has to fit in the box because I am doing tech house, so it's within that tech house box, but it's my tech house. So I will put my own little twist on it and everything. And if a DJ decides that it's not for them, well, then it's not for them. I'm quite picky when I pick what I'm going to play. It can be a banging tune, but it may not fit into what I want to play in my sets, and it may not work with the type of crowds that I play to because they expect a certain something when I'm playing. So now with my productions, it's basically just am I having a little mini rave in the studio? If I'm having a mini rave in the studio and it mixes in well, because I'll always test if it mixes in well with all the tunes that I'm really loving and I know I'm going to be playing in sets, then I'm happy. And then if the DJ support it, brilliant. And if not, well, maybe they'll support the next one, you know.
Yeah. And Dylan, you have an interesting approach too with your work because you do a lot with visuals and it's sort of like a live show and experience. How has that kind of, you know, influenced you in terms of how you're approaching, you know, releasing versus, you know, the stuff that you're producing for live?
Well, I mean, I do a couple different kinds of live sets, right? And figuring out how to say it properly on the promotional material has been a little bit interesting because basically, like, I prefer the DJ presentation style. Even when I'm playing entirely my own music, I like to perform it using DJ technology because it allows you to dramatically restructure the set according to what the audience in the moment is feeling. Whereas, you know, I mean, there are different approaches in Ableton or other, you know, where like you can make like a linear timeline set that has like, you know, maybe 4 hours of music, right? And then you have these flags in Ableton that are set to different chunks. You know, there might be like the slow song here and then finale number 1 here and finale number 2 here. And you can kind of like rearrange within the timeline using MIDI triggers. So a lot of people will do that, like, you know, like Pendulum, Destroyed, Lenny, those guys, like KJ Saka is one of my really good friends, and that's how all those sets work. And that allows you to have all these like timeline cues, and, you know, you can have your DMX programming and your video and stuff attached to this timeline. But to me, I feel like when I'm performing, I really like to have the ability to just, like, you know, loop a section of a song and mix in another song, or have 2 songs go together that I've just never mixed before, you know. And I even though I'm playing usually strictly my own music, I like to use that DJ style format. So when I'm doing video, what do you call that? Because if you call that a DJ VJ set, it sounds like you're playing other people's music. So I was, for a while, I was calling it a live video set, right? But then we had this problem where people thought I was like gonna should be like hologram Tupac or whatever, and like, I would be like in my pajamas at my studio, and like this video would come up and be like, "And now live from Los Angeles, it's Bill Gates." So so yeah, so I don't know. It's kind of tough to figure out what to call that. So but when I do my video set, normally I'll put like video set, and then when I do that, I will use Serato with a plugin called Mix Emergency, because it allows you to have lip sync accurate videos. And I can cut together a video in Ableton. Even a lot of people know you can edit video in Ableton. I'll cut together a video in Ableton. Let's say I've remixed a rap song or whatever, I'll get the original of that rap song in there, and I'll warp it and line it up with my new remixed version of it. Maybe, like even like sometimes it'll be like all halftime and like, I'll like pitch shifted and stuff, and I'll kind of wonk out the video and then print that. And then I have like a big folder of these printed videos, and using a software called Mix Emergency, I'll pair these printed videos with the audio. So when I'm playing the audio, I'm playing like the WAV file. I'm not playing like an MP4. No way, right? But it's married to this video file in the Mix Emergency software. And Mix Emergency is made by Inkland, who is, I believe, one of the coders for Serato Video, who got kind of disgruntled with the implementation of Serato Video, and he kind of made his own little indie thing. So it's like FL Studio, where it's like, or Serum, where it's just like one person.
Yeah.
Like that blew my mind when I learned that like Steve Duda answers all of the help mail for Serum. He was like at Burning Man cleaning out the help inbox. Like crazy. Like and FL Studio is one guy.
Yeah.
It's insane. I mean, I'm sure you have other people now, but ImageLine's like one person, essentially. So yeah, it's one of those companies. But yeah, so so when I do that, I'll have a laptop, and then I'll do sometimes finger drumming on my trusty MIDI fighter. Love these things. But most of the time, like hooking up video and audio into one computer on the stage. A lot of time the venues, like, unless you have like a Cat5 extender to run the video over a Cat5 cable, you have this problem where, because the lights are on one circuit and the sound is on another circuit, if your laptop is connected to both of those electrical circuits, you get this phenomenon called ground loop phase interference, where you get this horrible hum coming through the sound system, and you can hear all the motors on the lights and stuff. It's terrible. So there's, so I kind of like, unless it's like a really, unless they want to pay a bunch extra and like make sure that there's techs that are like gonna help me out and do it, like, because I used to just like do it every time, but there's times when it's just like you do these like 4-hour sound checks and skip dinner, and you're just like, oh, all this for this tiny little screen, and nobody cares, and I just did it because I said I was gonna do it on the fly. So most of the time these days, I will just use CDJs and my MPC Live over there to do the finger drumming, so that I have no computer on the stage and that there are multiple points of failure, right? Because when you have everything running off of one computer, just like Bertie said, he's got to have a redundant setup. He's got to have 2 Abletons, because if you have a single point of failure and you're in an environment with a bunch of wasted people and drinks flying around, and it's like it's a matter of time before your computer eats it, So I like to use the MPC Live because it's battery powered. It's got enough battery and more than make it through set. I can just plug the RCAs in the mixer, turn that battery on. I got 3 CDJs that can all separately break, and it's like unless the mixer breaks,
right?
Fine, So that's typically how I roll live. And then as far as how I compose for that, if I'm playing entirely original music, the tracks need to be as idiosyncratic as I can make them. So I'm always like, when I sit down in the studio, because there's a lot of like economic pressure, especially from A&R departments at labels, where they're like, oh, well, you had a hit this one time, man. If you just do that again and again until that dead horse is bleeding on the ground and nobody cares anymore. And then your fans get bored and they're like, okay, we've heard that song. So I try to make my tracks as different from each other as possible. So I do a lot of collabs, and when I collab, I'm always trying to like stretch my brain and just like, you know, because I'm usually the one doing all the driving in these collabs, but I'm basically like, okay, how can I reinvent my collaborator's style with them there to teach me how their style works, you know? And then it's like, you know, it's like Bruce Lee, like my style is that I have no style, you know, my way is no way. And then the set is just like completely different every 5 minutes, you know? And then because that feeling like, you know, it's going to be dope, but you have no idea what it's going to happen. That's what keeps people coming back, you know?
Yeah, for sure. And what's interesting too is like you guys have been producing for quite a while, and you know, the evolution of the dance music scene, you know, over the, you know, from the 80s and the 90s and to early 2000s, and now it's kind of completely different. I want to talk to Claire a little bit because you kind of are genre hopping a little bit, and kind of what prompted you to kind of go to into tech house? Is it kind of, are you seeing this sort of evolution of the genres, and that's what's popular now? Or are you just sort of, is it more of an artistic thing for you?
It's just one of those things. I've always really quite liked tech house. I mean, when I was touring in Miami and stuff, I was playing kind of electro house, housey stuff, slightly techie stuff. Back in, I can't remember now, 2006-ish, I think it was. And I when I went to China, that was kind of like house and slightly techie, but tech house back in the days, obviously different to tech house now. It was more just it chugged along kind of thing. Nothing bad about it, just it chugged along rather than. And tech house these days, you can throw in the odd Hoover and the odd massive horn and stuff, and I can use bits that I've been using in the bass sets and you know, the stuff that I produced in bass house and the breakbeat stuff that I've been making, and kind of twist it, slow it down a little bit, and make it work with tech house, and put a nice housey beat to it, and then it can just, you know, kind of roll from there. So it's quite nice that I can bring in all the influences from other stuff and other genres that I've been playing over the years, and mix it up. I mean, I've done a remix of Fedde Le Grand's Detroit tune because it was one of the big things when I went to Ibiza. It was catchy, and I thought that's quite nice, and you can bring it around and make it tech house. And then did a Timbaland remix, kind of twisted that and made it tech house, you know. And you can just take all the kind of stuff that you really like from other genres, and as long as you've still got that nice housey beat and a grooving bass line, the rest of the little bits that you throw in and the type of vocals that you throw in can be all sorts of stuff, and it's great. And then it's just about you pitch the vocals, you slow them down slightly, or you speed them up, or you know, you make a man sound like a woman so no one can tell where the vocals come from, and things like that. So it's just one of those. I kind of it sounds really bad, but I get bored in a genre. And there's nothing to say that the music and the genres are boring. Everyone in, you know, bass is still making brilliant stuff, but I found I hit a wall and I wasn't really enjoying it as much, and it all started to sound pretty samey, and I wanted something new. And I was thinking, well, I've been liking tech house for a while. I've been making it for a few artists for a while, as like a ghost producer, as you know, people call them, whether they think it's bad or good. Fun to do. So and I was thinking, well, I'm enjoying doing it for other people, so why not hop on and do it for myself, and see where it goes, see what people think. And it's going down quite well at the moment. So although I launched it at the wrong time, because I literally launched it in March officially. I'd had the name for 2 years, sat on it. In March, I was like, I'm going for it, I'm hammering it. And then the whole world went, no. And COVID hit, and everything got shut down, and no one was playing events, and no one could test tunes out in clubs, and no one could do this, and labels started slowing down. And I was just like, all right, so just building up a bunch of fun tracks for whenever we're allowed to get ourselves back into events with more than 6 people at the moment, I think it is.
Yeah.
For us anyway.
Yeah, that's pretty tough. So Verdi, kind of, how did you kind of arrive at sort of the genre world, you know, in terms of your work?
I would say uh, what happened was a bit like I had mentioned before, right? I was writing dance music, and I always had the need to kind of step out of that box of wanting to produce stuff that, you know, not have the minute intro or starting with some weird synth sound, you know, and not basically being considered to what the DJ would want, right? That just brought me to, once I decided to let go of that, which was about like took me about 4 years of my life to kind of make myself understand that maybe, you know what, you should just listen to your heart and produce whatever you want. So I just started, I don't know, I just spent a lot of time thinking about what is it I like about the music that I do. And I just started taking those elements and making them the center of the track versus, hey, this is my inspiration. Let me make this into a dance track. You know what I mean? So that turned into my latest project, Hoki, Hoki, where I started doing the first album. And a lot of the inspiration came from, you know, what is it that made me who I am? What are the things that, you know, past life experiences that, you know, I sat down, I wrote about them, I built mood boards, kind of try to focus in on something that I could actually go back to whenever I'm stuck, right? In terms of, okay, where am I going with this album? Let me go back to whether it's a catalog of sounds that I've built, or the mood boards that I built, or the text that I've written about myself in the past that has brought me to this point, right? A bit more, I guess, um, not a straightforward answer, you know? It just happened that way. And yeah, that's when I realized, I'm like, wow, we're writing electronic music now with a lot of indie vocals. What is this type of music, right? And a lot of my influences back then were like guys like Moderat, Rufus the Soul, you know, so all that translated into what it is today, which is, you know, indie dance, ambient, melodic, deep house, you know, so that's how I kind of shift through, and it's been great. It's been great since. I'm getting the most support I've ever gotten by doing what I want and not, you know, trying to get signed on a label.
Yeah, following trends. That was kind of where I was getting with this, is that all three of you are kind of you know, doing your own thing and sort of not necessarily following trends. Are you seeing that as kind of like, you know, I feel like maybe it's more of just looking back when we see kind of the trends in music. It's really the artists that are kind of driving those changes. Would you say is happening now in terms of music, of electronic music production? What are you seeing, you know, are kind of the main, either the big genres or kind of where you guys, you know, are sort of following in with all that?
The main big genre that I've seen recently is it's not trap, but it's not like big room EDM. It's kind of like a mixture of both. It's mainly coming from like Canada and stuff like that, and it's just it's massive. And I've seen like videos from my friends who played it, and it's just crazy. There's like mosh pits to electronic music and stuff like that, and it's basically just people who are making stuff that is just hype, and they're just loving the fact that it's just hype. And to a lot of people, they're not quite getting it because, you know, there's no melodies in there or anything. But when you see like 20,000 people going nuts to this insane random sound drop, then you know that sometimes it doesn't have to be melodic. Sometimes it just has to be something that's going to get the dance floor moving, and that people are just going to go, I can go to this event and I know I'm going to have a good time, and I don't care, you know, to label it or whatever. I just know that the DJs are going to be enjoying themselves. They're going to be dropping heavy stuff, and we can enjoy ourselves. And that's just how it goes at the moment. You've got your popular music, obviously, and you know, tech house fits into that kind of box to some degree, but there are still other bigger genres that you don't realize are actually out there, and it's just because someone made a weird noise and tested it and tried it. So I think it's all about these people who are just pushing boundaries and just trying to do something a little bit different, and like us, not caring and just hoping that we can enjoy ourselves, and that if one person enjoys it, then that's a bonus, and then if thousands of people enjoy it, well, it works really well then.
Yeah, for sure. And Dylan, would you say a lot of the evolution of your sound has to do with the changes in technology? And
I mean, the evolution of my sound has been kind of a funny journey because, you know, I used to be like completely inside the box, right? Like, and I used to be really punk rock about it, you know, because, you know, I was just always like, you know, there's all these people trying to sell you gear and trying to sell you software and like trying to tell you, you know, there's a right way to do it and a wrong way to do it. And the people who push the evolution of music, like it's always like some 15-year-old kid who just doesn't care. And they're just like, hey, none of you people thought about this, and then they just pull the rug out from under everything, and everybody, it just seems so obvious in retrospect, and everybody's like,
Yeah.
oh wow, my kid could have done that. It's like, yeah, well, your kid didn't, did they? You know? And then music moves on, right?
Yeah.
So I was always really kind of punk rock about that, but then I had this one dude that I was mentoring who's basically like Tony Stark. Like the guy is like this crazy millionaire, and he runs this online marketing company where he, you know, he's like really secretive, but he was buying like 100 grand worth of ads a day on this card that he was getting Amazon points at. So everything from Amazon was free for this guy. So he has this studio with like these synthesizers, like wall-sized modular synthesizers that could like fatally crush you, you know? But he didn't have any time to learn them. So he was like, okay, Dylan, you come and stay at this studio that's like just beyond your wildest dreams, and you learn how all this stuff works. And then when I come back from work, you got to show me how this works. And he had like everything, like the whole UAD collection, but like the real hardware, and just these like so much money. And I had never really got a taste for that, you know. I didn't really appreciate it, you know, like because you know there's like Odyssey headphones with the planar magnetic speakers. Like I don't know, it's the first time you hear those, it's like a religious experience. He has like a hi-fi that's like that, like it's like this $50,000 hi-fi, and he had like Pink Floyd on reel to reel playing through this like hi-fi. Like it changed my life, right? So after that, I started collecting analog synths, and you know, I have come to appreciate um, the value of making long recordings of the sound design process, right? Because that little tidbit of workflow is something that you often just bypass it when you're working in a DAW. The tendency is to be like, okay, I've got, you know, this MIDI pattern that's my bass sound, and I'm gonna, you know, design this bass sound and make the perfect bass sound for this MIDI pattern. And because you're not recording it, and because you don't want to ruin your patch, you end up making these really conservative sound design decisions. Whereas if the point is to make the recording, and you're not, you know, you're not gonna like go back and edit it, like you're just committing to this, I'll just like loop apart and grab knobs and just be like turning the knobs as it's playing, you know, close my eyes, just like generate as much chaos as I can, be like, you know, putting extra notes in with my elbow, you know, like transposing it around, changing the patches on the synthesizer while it's playing, you know, stuff like that, until you get these like long, chaotic recordings that you can then restructure. And it sounds like you've put in dozens of hours of automation to create these sounds, but actually just generating these long recordings. And then because you know, the effects are hardware and stuff, like a lot of the time you can get away with almost dry recordings of hardware synths rather than this like kind of processed digital sound that I was getting in the box. Because like, I don't know if you know what like a moire pattern is, but you ever like go by two chain link fences, and the way they line up, you'll get these like, you know, these like patterns as they kind of come in and out of phase with each other, right? And it's because of the repetition of the mathematics, right? Well, when you're using digital plugins, you know, and you're using the same EQ at the end of every chain, or the same, you know, the same exact same compressor. Each instantiation of that algorithm is printing pretty much a mathematical replica of this textural fingerprint onto the
Mm-hmm.
audio. And unless you're like using analog modeled plugins, or you're using, and this is why a lot of people really like mixing with like outboard hardware mixers, because you know that EQ as manifest on each of the channels in the strip is like slightly different. So you get this different texture, and you don't get that kind of moire pattern effect of the repetition of the algorithms, and you get like this openness to the sound. Whereas in a digital system, if you want to get that feeling of openness, you've got to like really work at it. You've got to play with like the Haas effect, like in parallel, and like, you know, get these like, you know, use a different reverb here and there, and like, you know, change the spread. So you like one of your reverbs is mono, one of them's like only coming in one side, and you know, do all this stuff to get that feeling of openness that just naturally comes from because it's, you know, fidelity is something that is lost, you know, like most guitars come, if you have like a guitar running through like a nice amp, and it's been mic'd up in a room, especially if you've done it in stereo, it'll just have that feeling of openness in the recording. The recording might not be with the right frequency balance, and it might not have the right dynamic structure for your mix, but there is that feeling of openness. And then, you know, that feeling of openness is something that's easily lost, right? So over time, I've learned to work, you know, more and more with outboard, and more with like just extremely minimal processing, and really the intricacy comes less from the signal path and more from the just different styles of composition and editing of the recordings. And you know, I've been really kind of getting back into doing like melodies in like on drum pads and stuff like that, like rather than just like having these like melody patterns that are in the sequencer with like some VST that is just like never changes. Because like a lot, especially if you load up a preset, you get a preset that's like really sweet. A lot of the time, you know, you'll be trying all these possibilities and they just make it worse. Because guess what? If the person who programmed that preset is any good at their job, they tried all those possibilities. They're giving you the best version of that sound, right? So it's like, you know, you end up just like, you just end up with this perfect sound on a perfect MIDI pattern. And it's just like, you get this kind of like layer cake effect where everything is just like, it's like the first idea and everything's all on top of itself. Whereas when you just actively deconstruct the process, you know, you can have work super dry, and it
Yeah.
just sounds like so open, man. So that's, I don't know, that's been, you know, one of my big revelations in the last couple of years, which ironically is much more old school way to work.
Mm.
But you know, my aesthetic is not old school, so it doesn't sound old school.
Yeah, so all three of you are music educators, and you know, working with students and coming up, and what are you kind of advising them in terms of their workflow and kind of imparting your production process? I guess that, you know, today the game has kind of changed in terms of production and everything. So how are you guys sort of you know, what advice would you give for, you know, aspiring producers getting into the game today?
Basically, just try different things. Everyone's so, oh, but doesn't it have to be done this way or that way? Did you achieve your goal? Yes.
Mm.
Does it matter how you get there? It doesn't. It really doesn't. There's a lot of people who are like, oh, well, I've done it and I've done it this way. And I was like, that's fine, as long as you've got that achievement. Some people use like buses for reverb. Some people don't use buses to send reverb. Some people will group everything but not bus everything, if you get me, because you can do groups, can't you, in certain things, and stack things inside, you know. So people work differently. Some people work by just doing the bog standard copy and paste method, where you find you make your loop, you copy it all the way across, and then you deconstruct it. Whereas there's others who will start right at the start and they will build their track from the first kick drum and build it across, kind of thing. Because there is no right and wrong way. As long as you're getting what you want, then it doesn't matter how you get there. You know, if your friend is saying, oh, but you've got to do it this way, if that's not comfortable for you, then don't do it that way. Do whichever way works out for you. There's certain little things I do. When everyone's side chaining, I won't side chain using compression. I don't like to add extra compression to things. So instead, I'll side chain using something like Duck or LFO tool or even the tremolo, because all you really wanting to do when you're side chaining is just make it dip. So what's the point in then adding extra compression? If I want to compress it, I compress it. And then, whereas there's other people who really enjoy adding the extra compression on and using the side chain in that kind of sense. So, you know, when I first started producing, I was like, right, it's going to have to be done this way. And you watch a couple of videos online and you see how someone does it, and then you kind of assume that is the way that it has to be done. But like Dylan was saying, do it some different kind of way, change it up. And ultimately, especially for students, have fun with it. Don't try and be in competition with people. If you're there going, oh, but I got this friend and he's only been doing it for 3 months and he's got something signed to such and such, or well, it doesn't matter. You do what you're doing, and at some point, if you want it to get signed, you know, it will get signed when it's the right time to get signed. Perhaps theirs got signed and it's not as good as yours, but, you know, the label just wanted something that sounded like that at the time or something, you know. So the only person you should be in competition with, technically, is yourself. To just make everything better than your last production. And it doesn't matter if somebody got there in a year or someone got there in 5 or 10 years. Just enjoy what you're doing, because otherwise you'll have a nervous breakdown. You fully will, because you'll be like, oh God, but it's been a year and I haven't got this far and I haven't made this much and I'm not on this label. And you're thinking, well, that doesn't matter. Have you progressed in that year? Have you learned things in that year? And as long as the answer is yes, that's all right. If you haven't progressed, then you need to start looking at why you haven't progressed and try and then just figure out what it could be. And I've found a lot of it with the students that come to me. They've kind of hit a brick wall because they're sitting in the studio on their own. They're too scared to send it to other people to listen to, because they'll send it to their friends and their friends will just be like, mate, that's a banger. To anything, it doesn't matter what they send them. And that's great. Your friends will hype you up. But you need the honest friends who are going to turn around and go, mate, I've got to be honest, I'm not feeling it. The bass line doesn't work. The vocal doesn't work. Because only then will you start progressing, when you really can start being constructive with yourself and move things forward. So, yeah,
for sure. I think we have maybe about 5 minutes left. So just, I guess, real quick, Vardy and Dylan, what advice do you guys have for aspiring producers? I know you guys both work with aspiring producers.
I would say patience, right? I think the most magical thing is when you've developed your skills to a point where you could truly communicate what you're feeling in a song. It's such an amazing feeling, right? A lot of times producers at a certain stage, wherever stage they're at, they're often struggling with what's in here to put it on a piece of paper or on the DAW, right? So to have patience, be consistent, show up, produce, ask help, get better, you know what I mean? But most important thing is that things take time, right? Good productions, good music. You're gonna write that, hopefully, that masterpiece down the line, but that's gonna take time, right? So patience is one of the most important thing. And for electronic artists specifically, always kind of step away from over processing stuff, a bit like Dylan said. I come from the band world where you go through recordings and you over process the hell out of the album, and that's what we want as metalheads. We want that super tight guitars and drums. And in the electronic world, like, we kind of tend to, we're going more the opposite way, right? Field recordings, performances are not necessarily fully on time. I'm releasing an album where there's absolutely zero auto-tune on the vocals, no comping done. It's one, I grab the fourth take and that's it. It's like, so there's a lot of that organicness that I tend to teach more of the advanced students, right? And at the end of the day, we don't really give a shit what you're using or how many EQs you have on the sound. It's how it feels, right? No one really cares like what you're using. It's how it feels. And if I'm going from being fully in the box, a bit like Dylan, to like using a lot of my guitar, right? Classical guitar recordings, analog gear, to kind of add that human uncertainty in the sound, right? Which is kind of amazing. But yeah, there's one thing I have to say: be patient with yourself and be consistent at producing, just nonstop. It'll take years, but you get there.
All right, so as you mentioned before, I run a record label and online community called Producer Dojo, where it's basically like, it's a record label for my music and my friends, and then also just this network of musicians helping each other. We have Dojo TV, which is like our streaming channel, where I teach class every Wednesday. I'm actually teaching one later today, and I have all kinds of guests on, like archives and stuff. But one of the big things that I teach people, right, is that you should not be afraid of making mistakes. Right? Because most people are so they don't realize that mistakes are what learning looks like, and that if I explain something to you in text, it's just a paragraph of text. But if you go out there and you apply that thing and you break it and you see where that is true and where it is not true, then now you have internalized that piece of knowledge and you can recall it by instinct later. So what I typically recommend people do is they if let's say you're learning to play piano or something, there'd be a type of composition called a study, where you're basically learning one particular type of movement or one particular compositional concept or whatever. And it's not really like, you're not really going to listen to an album of studies, it's there for learning, right? So I usually tell people when they're starting, I'm just like, hey, copy shamelessly, dissect the arrangement and composition of a track you like copy all the MIDI parts, which is blank MIDI clips, so you can look at what a well-composed song looks like, make yourself a timer. Like I use these apps, this app Seconds Pro for training athletes, and I'll make a timer and it's like,
chop sample onto pads for 5 minutes. Make several sequences for 5 minutes. Add beats plus build-ups for 5 minutes. Make a drop for 5 minutes. Fill out the groove for 5 minutes. Arrange and automate for 5 minutes.
Do that, and you can make a track in half an hour. If you do that a bunch of times with the intention of just never releasing it, if you get lucky, great. But if not, whatever, it's half an hour, and you do that a bunch, so that you're kind of like internalizing all these pieces of knowledge, make sure each one has its own concept, like, I don't know if when like pachinko machines, they're like in Asia, they're really into gambling. It's this form of gambling machine where there's this elaborate system, almost like pinball, and you get these balls, put the balls in the top, and they bounce down through the machine through the force of gravity, and they'll land in one compartment or another, and you'll score, and it's all very noisy, and there's lots of LED lights. Well, basically your process should be kind of like a pachinko machine, and then each idea should be like a ball. And basically the main creative decision is like, what is the idea of this song? What is the main motif? What is that chorus lyric? What is that thing that you would describe to your friend, right? You come up with that, then just iterate the process. And you train yourself to just don't think about it. Don't second guess anything. Just let it happen. Don't music properly executed, you let it happen. You don't make it happen. You let it happen. You channel it. It comes through you, effortlessly, right? And it's when you're beating your head against the wall and measuring your work against, it's a comparison is the thief of joy. You want to let it happen. And when you've done enough of these little, half-hour beats that you don't care about, then when you find an idea that you're like, oh, this one's good, maybe run it through like a few different half-hour processes until you're like, oh yeah, no, it sounded better in this way. So now I'm going to take my time and build all the sounds from scratch and not just use a template. And I'm really going to make the deluxe version of this iteration, Yeah. And then, when you do that, set aside a whole day, get up early, drink lots of coffee, try not to get too wasted until like late, and just give it an honest try.
That's
and
halfway.
Oh, there we go. My timer beat. Okay. But yeah, so as long as you get enough of these little studies under your belt, and you just make them, you just don't care about them too much, then when it is time to care, you'll have a roadmap and it'll just be instinct, and then you just let it happen.
Yeah. Well, I think we're just about out of time, and sorry we didn't really have enough time for questions, but we'll pop in there in the Facebook group, and we'll also give some info about our guest panelist today, Dylan, who popped in. And so yeah, I don't know, AES team, did you want it? Is there anything else you'd like us to cover, or you wrap it up?
You should go watch my new music video with Gucci Mane. It's got over 1 million plays. I'm so stoked. Just type in Ill Gates Gucci Mane, you'll get it.
Yeah, it's a great track. Cool. Yeah, so I guess that's a wrap, guys. So thank you guys so much for sharing your words of wisdom on the production of EDM with the AES community.
Chiming in from the control room here.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Great insight, great input from all of you, and great messages that I, for one, have also been professing since the 80s, so I was glad to hear you guys talk about it. Yeah. Definitely let the accidents happen, or even intentionally experiment. If somebody says to you, that's a guitar effect, say, oh really? And try it on the drums. If someone tells you that's a drum effect, say, oh really? And try it on the vocals. Because you never know where you're going to land. So thanks everybody for tuning in today, and thanks to our panelists, and thank you very much, Adam, for putting this together. Everybody check out the Producers Alliance, and definitely follow up on our comments here. We'll add some stuff after this broadcast. So we're going to end the link to Facebook. Take care, everybody. Thanks so much.